Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me? Dobry wieczór Państwu. It's to the Polish group. I feel privileged to have been given the opportunity to say a few words about a personality, namely Dr. Janusz Korczak, whom I have always admired and loved for his generosity, his heroics, and his profound, almost religious empathy for children. Like looking for the lost Atlantis, I keep on excavating Dr. Korczak's life, finding facets of the man that rest between the lines of his work, particularly of his World War II ghetto diary, a place in which he found refuge from the terrible world that surrounded him. Sorry. The Warsaw Ghetto. I find this diary a kind of a blueprint of Korczak's way of dealing with life. In these pages, one gets a glimpse of the workings of his thoughts and not just what others may think about him. In these pages, he often refers to his life as a young person, and one can see that above all else, there still exists a child in Korczak, though he's now old and ailing. He doesn't feel sorry for himself, nor does he write about the horrors of the Nazi ghetto. Not at all. His diversion is the memory of his youth and the path his mind has taken to travel from the child he was to the man he became. He writes somewhere that one cannot know another well, another person. Here in the question, how did Korczak know so well, excuse me, I have a cold. How did Korczak know so well the mind workings of a child, his needs, his foibles, his sadnesses and joys? The diary shows that much of the answer lies in Korczak's exploration of his own self and of his life. Through self-examination and experience, he became a man with passionate and deep concern for a child's welfare, a child's healing, not only of the body, but also of the mind and the soul. I found the following quote in Betty Lifton's book, From How to Love a Child. And here's the quote. A child, a skilled actor with 100 masks, a different one for his mother, his father, grandmother, or grandfather, for a stern or lenient teacher, for the cook or maid, for his own friends, for the rich and poor, naive and cunning, humble and haughty, gentle and vengeful, well-behaved and willful. He disguises himself so well that he can lead us by the nose. Indeed, Korczak must also have been that child who had to wear many masks, and that is how he knew about children. He went beyond his specialization as a pediatrician, but reached to other areas of a child's human need and being. Korczak undoubtedly adapted his theory of a mask wearer to himself as an adult. He became a doctor who listened with all his senses to the child, the kind of a listener who really heard the child and gave him the opportunity to speak out, a teacher who taught without appearing to be teaching, the best kind of teacher who involves the student and interacts with him or her. Thus, he was more than a teacher, but an educator who enriched a child's emotional development in relation to his environment, culture, and religion. He was a mother and father to the orphans, caring for them and loving them. A psychologist who intuited and prodded into a child's mind and behavior. He was a writer, a social reformer, and a breadwinner. His roles, or the masks, one might say, all fit under the umbrella of Korczak as a philosopher whose theories he set to practice and which are now taking root among us. The orphan's home, as it was called, one might consider as Korczak's microcosmic laboratory, where he practiced and researched his philosophy on how to love a child. From my own experience, I now can see no more important issue in a child's healthy development than to be loved, heard, and acknowledged, both by words and deeds. I think that children often carry their internal bruises throughout their lifetime into adulthood. They keep everything bottled inside, even though they can still cope with a world which doesn't understand them. But they do it at a heavy price. Those are the children of war, the persecuted, the immigrants, and the underprivileged, and who is there to heal the internal wound of the thwarted child. Sure enough, today there's more education in the understanding of children, more people striving to help them, although racism, poverty, and problems of identity still exist. And those children with unhealed wounds, now adults, still have to wear many masks to conceal their real selves. I was one of those children. I lived in the times when children were to be seen but not heard, when every Jewish European child was sentenced to death by Hitler. I grew up in fear and isolation and had to be hidden because I was a Jew. Not allowed to express myself, I had no voice, no words with which to describe my feeling or who I was. Only the numb ache and unspoken fear of being discovered signaled that something was so terribly wrong with my life. I had no identity of my own and lived as someone else under a false document and a new name. So that person would become my other self, while the real me remained hidden. And that is when I became aware of masks that Korczak speaks of. That other girl, who I had to become in order to conceal my true identity, wore a mask of survival in its many forms. When I became an immigrant and came to Canada at 12 years of age, no one wanted to hear of my experience, nor listening to that which lay in my heart and mind like a ton of bricks. My parents never spoke of the past except to tell me to forget it and live as if I were born in Canada. I adopted a mask of a Canadian towards my teachers, my fellow students, my parents, and my friends. No one knew a thing about the real me. I wanted to please my parents, be like my peers, wanting desperately to fit in. I played the Canadian game, but at the same time, before my eyes lingered the beautiful Polish landscape, its forests, fields, and Polish culture that I loved. Alongside these things, I had continuous visions and nightmares of the Warsaw Ghetto Wall and the street where I lived, not far from Korczak's orphanage. And I had visions of the murdered members of my family. When I saw food at the abandoned Canadian tables, I felt the ache of hunger in my stomach for bread of which there was never enough during the war. But not least of all, I suffered the loss of the self I had not yet recovered. Many years later, after I became a wife and a mother, I finally found my voice in a diary I kept, which was later turned into a book and published. And this was the final acknowledgement of all the suffering I had felt throughout the years, and my healing began. Healing that I often feel happens when I speak to students in school against racism. During my adult years, when the time came to love my own children, there were problems because of my past in the Warsaw Ghetto and in hiding. I went through many journeys of discovery and self-explorations before I finally came out of hiding, dropped the mask of my other self, and understood the true meaning of love. And that is that you don't love a child for what she or he can do for you or what you expect them to become, but that your role is not to judge them, only to love them, and to find ways to let them know that they are, as Korczak would say, people too, with rights to dignity, respect, and justice. I only wish in the adult world that there were more people who could really understand the unhealed child in the adult. Korczak did, and he could also understand the adult in the child. Thank you.
Janusz Korczak was the major inspiration for the UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child. And in Canada and in much of the rest of the world was also the inspiration for the field of social pediatrics. which focuses on developing and fostering a network of care for the most vulnerable of youth, those youth who are in Child Protective Services supervision and facing social inequities that are absolutely not of their own making. In Canada, I am very pleased to let you know that we have one of the leaders of social pediatrics, one of the creators of the field of social pediatrics, to speak here tonight from Montreal. And he will talk about his work. It has started with a grain and has grown to be quite an event in Montreal, having a major effect on young people in low SES and in Child Protective Services custody, and has really affected the model of care. This is Dr. Gilles Julien. We also will have Ardith Walkem, who is the legal counsel for Indigenous nations, who has helped design systems based on Indigenous laws and customs for children and families. And Dr. Christine Locke, who is a developmental pediatrician from BC Children's Hospital, from the Division of Developmental Pediatrics, and who has led the development of a social pediatrics model right here in Vancouver. Dr. Julien is a visionary leader. He's created a preventive approach of community social pediatrics, guaranteeing that each child's fundamental rights, as set forth in the conventions of the rights of the child, are respected, and that every child from a disadvantaged background has a meaningful opportunity to fully develop and reach their potential. Over the years, Dr. Julien has mobilized people from Montreal's neighborhoods, and the model of social pediatrics that he has promoted shapes programs now throughout Canada. He's affiliated with McGill University and the University of Montreal. I hope you will join me in welcoming Dr. Gilles Julien, who is, I'm sure we have a lot to learn. Thank you.
I'm very pleased to be here. I was quite honored when I had the invitation. You understand me in the back, yeah? Because Korczak was one of the unknown mentor I had, and I found a book in my library when I was preparing this meeting that I bought in 1979 in French, talking about the respect of the child, and I was very impressed with that, and it's really it was really a very strong inspiration of everything I've done since then. And you know, when I read again the words he pronounced at that period of time, I'm still very much impressed, because one of the main issues of the work I've been doing with children is really how to decode these children, because they speak a lot. They speak all the time, in fact, even though when they're not, they didn't have started to speak yet. They speak. They speak at the nursery. They speak everywhere. And if you observe a child closely, you can understand a lot of things. So you know, when he was speaking of mask, he was quite right. The thing to do is to learn to decode. And it's very easy at some point if you focus on the child. If he feels you love him, he's going to tell everything, most of the time without words. So if there's a message that I can pass, it's really to follow that line, to get close to children, to observe them, to look at them, to prefer them to adults, because they appreciate that a lot, and then decode the suffering, and when they get mad, there's always a reason, and a good social pediatrician and all people working in social pediatrics, not just physicians, can, if they can decode, they can work quite better with these children. I'm going to start with showing you a small video which tells a lot about what we're doing. I don't know where it is anymore. I'm sorry, I'm not good at these things. It was made by my son, in fact, and it explained in 4 minutes everything we do, in fact.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Melissa is 10 years old. Her life is not easy. She shares a chilly, unhealthy apartment with her mother and little brother. She always has a cold. Her mom works at night and is seldom around to take care of her. Her father's behavior has been violent. The authorities have ordered him to stay away. Resources are scarce. A youth protection worker is already involved with them. Melissa doesn't sleep well and has dark, suicidal thoughts that worry people close to her. She cries a lot at school and doesn't pay attention in class. Her marks are terrible. She has recently developed behavior problems and is often absent from school. Her teacher suggests a meeting at the Community Social Pediatrics Center to find out what she needs and to set her up with coherent services. In order to come up with an overall picture of her health, the social pediatrics team bring together Melissa, key adults, and professionals already involved with her. In an informal setting, Melissa's voice is finally heard by everyone, and each person describes how they are involved with her. Everyone becomes aware of the difficulties Melissa faces. Many of these problems prevent her basic needs from being met and her rights from being respected. The meeting also highlights Melissa's many strengths. She is sociable and assertive. She is a very responsible child. She clearly expresses her wish to succeed in spite of the obstacles and shows a lot of interest in drawing and music. A range of resources are mobilized to get at the root of Melissa's difficulties and tackle the obstacles she faces. The doctor diagnoses her various problems. The social worker gets involved with Melissa's mother to find better ways to support her daughter. The lawyer provides assistance to address the problem of the unhealthy apartment. The art therapist helps Melissa to better understand her emotions. Volunteers help to make the most of her potential through drawing and music classes and lend a hand with homework. External partners are also on board to provide other essential services. Just like Melissa, thousands of children are at risk and face many obstacles harmful to their health and development. All these children will grow up to become adults who are expected to contribute to society. Community Social Pediatrics aim to provide all children with the same opportunity to develop their full potential. They will then be able to take their place in the world on an equal footing.
May have to come back. You didn't want to come up here, so now you do. It tells the whole story, in fact. That's how we decided to develop an approach which fits with the Convention of the Rights of Children, and on the basis that kids are also humans. Okay. Good, thank you. We all know this notion that it takes the village to raise a child, and I've learned that a lot. I was working in Africa for a while, and with the Inuit community of northern Quebec for many years. And when you work there, you understand that the village is very aware and close to children, and most of these children are smiling. I learned that because when I left Montreal to travel in the world to see what was going on, I felt kids in Montreal, in the poor area, were really sad all the time. When I traveled to Africa, I was attending settlements who were very, you need to walk days to go to these places. It was very poor, the poorest you can imagine, sickness and everything, but they were smiling. And I couldn't imagine children in such conditions smiling that much. They did because the village was there with them, and they were surrounded, and adults were taking care of them, treating them as a normal human being. And it was the same in the Inuit communities. So I came back to Montreal to develop an approach to make children smile. And for those who come to our clinic, they all smile. They're very happy to come. We're happy to see them. Even when we talk of dramatic situation of all sorts and all kind of stresses, we keep smiling all together. And that's really a way to get close to people so we can help them better. The problem is when we divided the convention in 7 principles, so it's easier than to remember 40, 42, 41 rights. And we really function with these 7 principles. Every time we see a child, and we check all of them to make sure all rights are preserved. So it's just a matter of working more easily with the convention. The problem is mainly when the village becomes toxic for a child, and it does happen in many communities around our country. It's relating, it has to do with poverty, but it has to do with not just economic poverty, it has to do with what we call total poverty. Total poverty is when adults are not able anymore to take care of their children, or when the community is not able to cope with different difficulty of their children. And there are many what we call toxic stress that are implicated with children's health. You need to stay close.
We need a professor.
Yeah, community social pediatric, as we see it, has to cover all these toxic stresses and develop tools to address them. If the house is unsafe, you need to work so it becomes more safe. If it's toxic because of molds or any kind of environmental issues, you need to have tools to cope with that, help the family to clean the house, involve the community to make sure there's none of these stressors. So a good community social pediatrics clinic address these toxic stresses, which is very important because we can see the effect of toxic stress even in the first 3 years of life. When a child is surrounded by toxic stress, the brain does not develop, and that shows it very, very effectively. This was from a report from Great Britain, and they put it in a way where the slides speak for itself. The brain gets smaller, does not develop, and the more the toxic effects grow with the child, the more difficulty you'll have to repair this problem. If you, even at that age, at 3 years old, a child who's been victim of severe neglect with a brain which has not developed properly, we can repair to some extent with a lot of love, with a lot of accompaniment, with support with the families, not only by putting the child in foster home. This is the end of the tunnel, but the community has to do the work before we get in big institutions to become parents of our children. And the cost of it is huge. As you can see, the cost of repairing a child who's been who had accumulative toxic stressors, it is huge. And the more they grow, the biggest the cost becomes. And that's a good way to approach government to invest in social pediatrics who deal with this problem. And we finally succeeded in the province of Quebec because since a few months the government has decided to support the development of community social pediatrics all over the province and has decided to invest 22 million in the next 4 or 5 years, and maybe up to 60 as written in the decision of the government, so we can develop this kind of approach, which is kind of the link that does not exist between children suffering and having a lot of stressors and the institution who used to see them bits by bits in silos. So we link all these people together because we're very close with the families, with communities, and we share the responsibility of the child all together. It's not just the family, it's not just us. We share this responsibility together through loving these children. I love all children who come to my clinic. We see over 2,000 a year. I don't know them by name, but I know them by eyes. I remember the eyes of all children. So we get the contact, and we're pleased to see these children. They're our children also, and the parents adores that and will contribute and will change and will want to change their life habits and bad behaviors toward their children because of the trust. They want to please us. They want to make sure the child perform at school. They show the report card. They always bring the report card to us from school because we want to know if the child succeeds. If he does not succeed, we'll do a plan to support the child and the family. That's how it works. The poor society, a poor society doesn't take care of its children. Children are not a priority in a poor society. A society who cares will think of a social capital of children. But a poor society is failing the children. Usually when this happens, and it does happen for many children, we in the province of Quebec, and probably the same in Canada, 1 out of 3 children do not have all the tools to develop because the society as a whole won't invest in their children. It's a huge amount, numbers of children, like we have in the area where I work in Montreal. 1 out of 2 children is not ready to start school at 5 years old, which is a shame. It's just because nobody read books to the child, nobody took care of the child. And it's not because of bad parents, it's because the society where they live is poor, totally and globally poor. And we don't make success with that. And that's with these figures that we extrapolated, that 1 out of 3 children in Canada, in the province of Quebec, doesn't have all the tools that it should have. Usually when you're a poor society, you just turn toward the government to support your children. But the government has never been a good parent, never. You don't have any proof that when the government gets involved, that the children becomes better or gets more tools to develop. That's not what the government does. The government makes sure the child has that the right of protection is good, but all the other rights around the protection are not taken care of. When you place a child in foster home, you cut the friends, you cut the family, you cut the community, you depersonalize the child, and when they change foster home many times, they lost completely their identity. And war does the same thing. So you need to think more differently of how we should cope with these children. And my thinking is that the only way would be that the surrounding, the community, take care of the child. If we need the government, we call them. But if the community has not done the whole evaluation, put action around the child, it won't work. I'm pretty convinced of that. That's why we developed this kind of approach to support the communities and the parents. We developed a very specific approach, which is based on 4 different actions. The first one is always getting close to the child and the family. If you don't get close, you lose your time. You won't get the information you need to make a diagnosis. You will make a plan of action that nobody will follow. And you know probably what I'm thinking of. The school has a plan, youth protection has a plan, the hospital has a plan, and nobody shares that. The parents are completely lost with these plans because they do not participate in defining those plans. They're just met and we say, okay, now we do that, you should do that, and everything. It never works. So, so when you get close to parents, they will accept to share a lot of information. They will accept to participate in defining the plan. They will participate in decoding why the child is suffering that much. And the plan of action will be composed of everybody around the table who share the responsibility for the child. I don't know if it makes sense for you. For me, it's very, it's my day-to-day clinic are made like that. And when we see a new family, we usually put an hour for the whole program. We get close to them in an hour. We share information in the same period of time. We discuss the hypothesis of different diagnoses, and we share an action plan where everybody will have a place. And that's family, that's people around the table who comes from school, from youth protection, from different institutions who work with children. We just gather all together with the child, the family. We process the information together, and we make a consensus at the end on what to do, what to prioritize, how we will follow up the child together. And it's always a question of shared responsibility. And people want to work like that. I don't have families who refuse to do that. Even families who are classified as dysfunctional, poor, terrible, name it. They want their children to do better. It's very unusual to have a family where it's impossible to work with them to help their children. So our mission is very clear. We're just offering everything a child needs within the community. We participate a lot. We're kind of the leader of the child in the community. The child is always there. He's our first, the first person we talk to, that we want to meet, and the family comes next. The interveners come after, and all together we participate in that mission to support the child over the whole pathway of his development, from birth to 20 years old. So we have tools to analyze emotional issues, physical issues, mental issues, spiritual issues, and we have a lot of volunteers that participate in our organization to support children. We have mentors, we have big brother, big sister, we have men who comes to teach children how to fish. We have anything you can think of a child would need, we offer it. Because of the volunteers that joins our team. We have over 500 volunteers in our organization. They have a role and they participate in sharing the responsibility for children. And this is all financed by partly the population themselves. Every year we do the La Guignolée, which we raise money during Christmas. So people are invited to come to our place, to visit, to talk to our children, to our families. And the last Guignolée, which was the 13th, we raised $1,600,000 something. And that's part of our financing. But since the media has been involved with us for years, we have many people who, rich people who comes and finance a good part of it. And more recently, the government got involved. So we advocate a lot. We're always in the media talking about children issues. If there's an issue in the papers in the morning where we can participate, the next day we will publish an article on the schools that are terrible for our children, or youth protection who's not protecting enough, things like that. So we're very, very present in the media. It does help a lot for financing and for support of the population. I can't read here. So. Yeah, it's called the Montreal model. We started first in Montreal, in a poor area of Montreal. Then we developed another center in the community of Montreal, which was multicultural, just to make sure that this approach would fit any culture, and it does fit any culture. Now we have 20 sites in the province of Quebec. We see altogether around 5,000 children every year. The goal is to see 20,000 in 4 years with the support of the government. It's always related to the convention. In our office, you see parts of the convention on the walls, on drawings of children. We teach it. We have a team of children for their rights, and we have all sorts of things like that. What's interesting is that that's kind of a business plan. Social Pediatric Center are really the link between health determinants, children's rights, the basic needs of children, which are all the same. If you read the convention, you have all the determinant of health in there. But we put people together. Around the table, there's education, health, social services, legal, justice, culture, environment. We're all there. And we link these people together around the table. They come to our table within the community, and we do the work all together. And the government has seen that the importance of our work to put the institution together, to develop an approach which is not silos. And that's one of the reasons the Prime Minister has insisted to promote this approach and to finance this approach. I think my time is about gone. I talked this morning a little bit about the movement. If you come to see our clinic, you'll see a movement. We all move around the child. It's not just a circle by name, it's a real circle. We're all together around the child. We're not sitting around the table all the time. We just move a lot around the child. If the child is crying or the mother is crying, I'll go up, I'll take the child with me, I'm going to play ball with him. Social worker will take care of the mother. The father will talk to the educator. So we move all the time around the table. It's a musical chair, and this movement creates a lot of inspiration to support the child better. And when you move, people get anxious because they don't know where to sit, but this unbalance is serving our purpose, and we do it on purpose because this movement helps the child to feel better and the family to feel better. And we touch them too. When the mother starts crying because she just talked about her own history, we never hesitate to go around her and hug her because it's human. We're not supposed to do that as professionals, but we do it a lot in our approach. And it's a way that they become more resilient because they feel they are listened, understood, and participate in the whole plan. It's very frequent these parents leave their first visit saying to us, it's the first time somebody is listening to me. I'm the mother, I know more about my child, nobody talks to me. So that's what we want to attain. We're a social enterprise. We're not a community group, we're an NGO, but we work as a social enterprise. I could talk long about social entrepreneurship, but it's the same model as when you decide to invest to create money capital. We do invest to create a social capital where children will succeed and be completely part of the society. And we do create capital. So we work as an enterprise. We're financed. We have links with no organization, so we decide everything by ourselves. I have a board, and I think it's a way to adapt our intervention better to vulnerable children than to go bits by bits or parts by parts. It's all about social equity also. I will finish with this, this was written in 18-something. And we should always think about it because that's so true. If you invest with a child at 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 years old, and you're intensive and you assure some continuity and love, you're sure this child will get better. And he's going to be, that's the social capital. I see parents and some of the kids I've seen before coming every day with babies, and they broke themselves the circle of poverty, which is very strong and affecting a lot of children. So we succeed well on an everyday basis, and it's the practice of medicine that I've dreamed for a long time that I do practice. I'm very happy with it. I won't quit till the end because it's so pleasant and you're fulfilled with that a lot. So smile because there's hope. Thank you.
I don't remember.
Now, if I understood well, there's a lot of people, of children in the world that are suffering a lot with all these questions of migration and refugees and so on. I'm not sure we're ready to cope with these children because we didn't prove so good with our own children. But I'm kind of optimistic because they may help us to change. And I wrote an article in the papers recently on that because I think that, the second site we developed in Montreal is completely multicultural with a lot of refugees, and we're there since 15 years. And these kids are made strong, and the family who migrates usually they migrate to get better, but mainly to raise their child better, without war, without fear, and things like that. And these children succeed very well over a few years. The parents less, but the children, when they migrate, they adapt very rapidly, and they construct like a nest when people work with them well. And I was suggesting that these children and these families, which are very courageous, should influence our family to do better. That's a big issue, but I think these migrants will probably get better quite rapidly and influence our society positively. Yeah.
I think that we should work together. I'm coming from architecture, and I'm doing other side, what you are doing, kind of. But the thing is that you know more about post-traumatic stress, how to address. And our role, our side is how to help you or do together better environment for that. So that's very complicated, and I'm just wondering, as we said, if we are ready and how we can protect these children, because many of them came alone. I know that you said about the family, but many of them came alone to Canada, and a week ago or something, there were published numbers that, for example, in Sweden, they lost like 1,000 kids from the list they already registered, right? So it's been proven that in the EU now it's 5,000 children lost.
I don't have a solution to that.
I'm wondering if we can leave that as a question for right now. We have a couple of other speakers, and we'll have some time, I hope, at the end where we can all participate. Our next speaker is Ardith Walcom, who is a member of the, and I'm going to massacre this, the Nalakapamux Nation. Is that close enough? Which stretches from the interior of British Columbia into Washington State. She has a Master of Laws from the University of British Columbia, and her research is focused on Indigenous laws and oral traditions. Ardith has practiced extensively in the Indigenous communities, assisting Indigenous communities to assert Aboriginal title and treaty rights, focusing on assisting Indigenous communities to recover and to articulate their own laws and legal systems. She's worked as a legal counsel for Indigenous nations in matters involving their children, and has helped to design systems based on Indigenous laws for children and families. So I'm very much looking forward, and I'm very pleased to meet you, and I want to welcome you.
Where's our text?
I'm good just to start like this. My name is Welpetko Wydell-Swacom. I'm from a little community in the interior, and I am the youngest of 7 children. So I have 4 sisters and 2 brothers, none of whom I was raised with. So the rest of them were raised in residential schools or the child welfare system. So I'm the first of all of those to have been raised within my family. And the project that I was invited here, I think, to talk about is a project called the Shchimamit Project, it means our children. And this wrap that I'm wearing was designed by them. We asked our children to design a logo which represented what they wanted us to do. And they chose an existing logo. We thought they would choose like one with little children or so forth. And the logo that they chose is actually the cosmos. So this is all the planets and the stars, and they chose this. And they chose this because they wanted this to be them. So the big center would be them, and the little circle would be us, protecting them. On the other hand, they said that what they wanted us to do was that this would be our nation, and these are the kids that are outside of the nation in the child welfare system, and they wanted us to bring them home. They wanted us to call them home. And so this was what they gave to us. When I was first approached by my community, they wanted to address these growing numbers of children in care. They wanted us to take a legal approach based on our own laws that would do something about those exponential numbers. And the first thing that we did in BC is we went to the various courthouses. It might be the same across the country, but at least across BC, there tends to be one day of the week or one day every second week, which is, it's not a respectful thing. We call it the cattle call day. And what happens on that day is in Vancouver, there's a special time for all of the Aboriginal children who've been taken into care or who's had issues that week. They're all called there. In the rest of the province, that's a general call day, but always, at every single one that we've ever attended, the number of Aboriginal children and families, hugely overrepresented, always over half. And we wanted to go and see what was happening. And so we sat in Vancouver on one day, and on that one day, there was about maybe between 50 and 60 families. And we sat and we watched as all of these parents, often young, often very alone and vulnerable, not having any idea what on earth the lawyers and the judge was talking about, went and were completely unprepared. And one of the questions that the court always asked the director of the province, they always said to the province, has these children's Aboriginal community been notified? And in all cases, the province said yes, and they've done nothing. And so they dispensed with the need to involve them in the future. And so this got us to thinking, how come they're asking this? Is there a legal spot for our involvement? And if we could become involved legally, what could that mean? And here, when I was looking at those parents, and it literally was heartbreaking. I was in tears seeing them standing there alone and scared. And these are the parents. The children are even more alone because they're not even with their parents. They're completely isolated. And this brought to mind this one image of a misspent youth. So I grew up in the interior, and for a little while we lived in an area called Salmon Arm, which has Shuswap Lake. And in the winter, one time it was frozen, and I decided with a friend that we were going to take a shopping cart, I don't know why, and we were going to push it to the edge of the ice and push it over. Really not clever. I wasn't, I guess, a very clever teenager, because you can't push it to the edge of the ice will break. And so there I was with a shopping cart pushing it over. My clever friend stayed a titch behind, so she wasn't quite with me when the ice broke, but the ice broke. And that shopping cart went down, and there I was, and I kept trying to get out, and I couldn't get out because I would put my weight on one spot on the ice, and the ice would break, and the ice would break, and the ice would break, until finally I spread out my arms and was able to distribute my weight enough so that I could climb out of the frozen lake. And one of the things that came to mind as I sat there in that court on that day, which was the first child protection matter I'd ever attended, it wasn't my usual area, was I thought of myself at that time falling into the ice and being alone. And one of the things that I knew that we had to do as a people was that we needed to redistribute that weight, which is why I was very touched with this topic of social pediatrics, because I think what we're attempting to do in the law is very much the same, which is to redistribute the weight, to redistribute the responsibility away from just the individual parents who may be in some cases. I'm just going to leave it. Oh, good. It looks very different here and there. So one of the things that I asked myself is how come we get to the situation that we get to? And the reason that I was asked by my home nation to do this work is that we have had a steadily increasing number of Indigenous children brought into care. In the 1996, the number was about 43%. Roughly 4 years ago, the number was 50%. Right now, it's 55+%, edging closer to 56% of all children in care in BC are Indigenous, despite representing only 8% of the child population. Why that's important is that we've seen that the outcomes for children in care are abysmal. And what we're seeing in particular for Indigenous children, it's like dropping a rock in a pool of water, that the implications reverberate and reverberate. So we see that a lot of our clients in child welfare had grandparents or parents in residential schools, and that it becomes intergenerationally involvement in the child welfare system, involvement in criminal law, and we knew that we had to find a way to stop that. And so I have this picture here. I know it's not a discussion about fish, but this is a picture which is very key to Secwepemc law. It's one of it's one of the things that we tell quite often to speak about our legal obligations. And this is the Fraser Canyon in 1913, when the CN Rail was building tracks through the canyon. They caused a slide. And they caused a slide right in the middle of the early Stuart salmon run. So even today, the early Stuart salmon run is the biggest economic fishery, the biggest salmon fishery economically in the world. And it's cyclical, so it has a high note every 4 years. And this year was one of the high times, and this slide happened just when that run was hitting the river. And as a result, literally millions and millions of salmon died. In the next cycle, only 20% of the salmon had lived. But the reason that a lot of those salmon lived was that the Secwepemc people and their neighbors went down with baskets, went down with blankets, went down with buckets, and scooped the salmon who were dying there, who had no place to go, and carried them over the rock slide and let them go on the other side. And so the reason that this is so important to us in child welfare is that the clear direction that we have from our laws is that when we have when there are beings who are vulnerable in need, that we have an obligation to act. And so we see our children as being right there in the river right now and in need of assistance and in need for us to take very particular action. And some of the things that we've been very conscious of. I was very pleased in preparing for this lecture to do a lot of reading of the work of Dr. Korczak and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And one of the things that I asked myself is, what do those human rights, that human right of autonomy or self-determination, what should that mean in the context of an Indigenous child? How should that be any different? And one of the things that I think that we've been very, very conscious of is that when we talk about children, quite often we talk about parents, we talk about extended family, but in the context of the Indigenous child also has a right to the preservation of their culture. They have a right to a sense of belonging. They have that right to exist as part of a people's. And one of the things that I think we failed, and the reason those numbers keep growing and growing and growing, is because we haven't come to terms as a society with how to address that. And one of the solutions that we've been looking at is that the damage hasn't only been done to families. So we don't only have damage, maybe we have addictions within families, we have this history of trauma within families. But what we've also removed from children is we've also removed legal systems, social systems, and cultural systems. And we can see that we could try to treat all of those individual things with parents, with extended families. The one area, and frankly, in child welfare, we're succeeding with non-Indigenous children. Those numbers are dropping. Not succeeding with Indigenous children. And the reason I don't think that we're succeeding is that we haven't looked at the totality of who the child is and what their social context is, and what caused that ice to crack, what caused those parents to be out there alone, in the sort of legal, social atmosphere where things are falling apart. And I think that for Indigenous children, what we can see is that that's resulted from the denial of Indigenous laws, Indigenous ways of protecting children. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to wrap our ways around them, so to bring those laws back and to make them relevant. And one of the things that we've really looked at is that in law, BC changed its law in 1996 to give particular standing to Indigenous communities who appear in court. So in the rest of the country, such as Quebec, some of the territories, other provinces, Indigenous peoples who want to appear in court and to make an argument for their children's sake have to get permission of the judge to do so. In BC, you don't. If you just appear in court, you have an automatic right to make an argument about your children. But in practice, we're not there. It doesn't happen. It's so stunning for me that we're not there. And part of the work that we're trying to do is to reinvigorate that participation of Indigenous community. And so I've been involved in a project which does this, which travels around and intervenes in cases. And a lot of the work that we do is to a lot of our work is very similar to the work about autonomy. If you ask Indigenous children, do you want your nation or community involved? If they haven't been denied knowledge of that, if they have knowledge of what that involvement might mean, universally they say yes. So they might be mad at their parents, they might be mad at their extended family, they might not think that their family is capable of protecting them, but they never not want to be connected to their community, to their nation. One of the other things that we've been very, very conscious of is this idea a lot of the time when we talk about protecting the child, because maybe a child is facing kind of immediate danger. Maybe there's violence or sexual abuse, or there's something that endangers the child in the home. Right now, the way the system operates is that it removes the child to protect them. But in the long term, protection ends up harming children, because what happens at the end of that system is that you have a child who's radically isolated. So you remove them to protect them from the dangers that are here this month, but then you slowly snip away and you leave this child who's very isolated. And I know they say that they're ending this in BC now, but one of the things that was very powerful for us was we were looking for our children, because our kids at home said they wanted us to go and find them. And we found some of them who were aging out of care because they had got to be, 15, 16. They were so hurt and angry, and they couldn't really stay in foster families anymore because they were just furious. And so they started housing them in hotels. So we found these poor little kids who are members of our nation, completely isolated, completely without a family. And one of the things that we really started to look at is this notion of protection, that protection for children can't just be immediate protection. Protection for children has to be over their lifetime. And in assessing what it means to protect a child, we also have to ask how cultural factors can insulate them from damage over the long run, and how that can maintain a sense of wealth, a sense of resilience. And when we see these children sort of coming back, universally, their biggest regret is that they lost this part of their identity, and that a large part of our work involves people who've come back and are very firm and fierce and fighting for the rights of children who are in the system now. And they're talking about attachment. So attachment not just in sort of an interpersonal sense, but attachment in a cultural sense, that you can have senses of attachment. When we oftentimes, for example, go to court and we fight for the rights of elders within our community, cultural leaders within our community, a lot of community members who are attached to children, to have those attachments maintained, to maintain attachment to land is very important, which is quite often really hard to translate, the need to maintain an attachment to territory. But these are some of the things that we're looking at and trying to broaden this concept of what it means to keep children well. And there's been a lot of development. I know you were very lucky to have Mary Ellen Trepel-Lafond speaking here recently, but one of the things that we're looking at, and I understand this has happened since she was here, is that we're talking about the human rights of children. There's been a lot of development in this area, and in particular for Indigenous children. There's been a recent case by a human rights case brought by the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society and the Assembly of First Nations, where they, in essence, alleged discriminatory funding. So the argument is that the way Canada funds child welfare programs it incentivizes removing children. So that we're talking about the preventative approach. The way that the federal government funds child welfare in BC, they only fund if you remove a child. They don't fund to keep a child in their family. They don't fund to keep a child with their grandparent, with their auntie. So if you want to keep a child with their auntie who's perfectly safe, there's no funding for that. If you want to take a child who needs protection and put them in a third-party unconnected home, there's money for that. So the human rights decision, in essence, said that Canada incentivizes the removal of children rather than repair and prevention, and directed that Canada fix that. There's also currently a number of class action suits that have been brought by these children that have been removed. They're coming across the country. There's a really big one. The biggest one will probably come in Ontario. There's one in BC, Alberta. They're coming across the country, where Indigenous people who have been removed and who are now adults are suing for the loss of culture and suing for the damage that has been done to their person. So they may have been kept physically safe, but socially, spiritually damaged. So there's very large class action suits that are currently underway alleging a human rights violation. And one of the other things that I wanted to sort of talk about very briefly is that very recently the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada released its report. And in that report, it chose to address the first 5 recommendations that it had. It's supposed to address the history of residential schools, which it did, but it decided to prioritize child welfare as the number one issue that society needs to deal with, it needs to reconcile with. And being here in this particular lecture to honor the lifetime and work of this man and the acknowledgement of human rights, I think that this is a very opportune time, and it's 2 rivers sort of flowing together. I think it fits very well, the idea of social pediatrics and what we're doing legally, which is to take responsibility as a society, as communities for children, because I think we need to acknowledge that for too long, what's happened is that children have become isolated, and until we're able to rewrap ways around them, we're doing it legally. And in doing that, we're providing a voice. We're providing a voice to the child and ensuring that the child is heard. A lot of the things that are coming through the convention and interpreting that through the lens of Indigenous children, saying what does it mean to honor the human rights of a child who's an Indigenous child who has a human right as an Indigenous child as well. And so that's not just individual, that means that we have to protect more of their culture and their future. And I know that we're running short on time, so I will close with that. The maybe one more thing that I think is very interesting, because we have these human rights cases in Canada. Maybe a lot of times in the law, what happens is you see kind of a sea change. Sometimes one thing happens in one country, one thing happens in another country. Very recently in the United States, there was a very big human rights case brought by the ACLU in the States, so the American Civil Liberties Union, and that was a case involving the Oglala Sioux, and they sued the Pennington County in South Dakota. So there was a county in South Dakota where they were hearing child welfare matters, and they wanted someone to look at the history in this court. And over 4 years, they dealt with 500 Indigenous children, and of those 500 Indigenous children, the parents lost 100% of the time. And a lot of the hearings were 60 seconds or less. So someone would stand up and they'd say, I want to make an argument, and the court would say, no, we've got a protection concern, sit down. And so, and I'm not making that up, like this was literally on the record. They had less than 60-second trials, 500 children, 4 years, parents won 0% of the time. And so the ACLU in the States made a determination as well, much like the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, that this disproportionate representation was a severe violation of human rights. We've had this finding in Canadian courts that this is a disproportionate representation, a violation of human rights. So it seems part of the legacy kind of moving forward to apply these human rights arguments. And I mention it because when you see sort of these things jointly coming up through different countries, I think it suggests to us that in the near future we're going to see a bigger recognition, which is well needed. And by the way, the two little noisy ones at the back, not the baby, but the bigger babies are my little babies who come everywhere. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm envious of your ability to tell stories. I'd really love to be able to capture that. Just a word about Janusz Korczak. He had a radio program. I don't know if you knew this. He had a radio program called The Good Doctor in Poland, in Warsaw, for a number of years before World War II. And he developed a model. He operated an orphanage that was mixed Jewish and Catholic children in Warsaw. And he developed a very innovative model called the Children's Republic, in which the children helped run the orphanage. And they were overseen. He became very famous, actually. Nowadays, he's kind of obscure, but during that period, he was very well known. And when the Nazis invaded Poland, and they segregated the Catholic children out, and segregated the Jewish community, people who had come to train with him contacted him and offered him chances to leave because it was becoming increasingly grim. Treblinka was set up outside of Warsaw, and they were bringing the population to Treblinka. And he said that you never leave a sick child. You never leave a sick child. He stayed, and he stayed to the end. And this is one of the factors. I mean, hopefully none of us will have to confront circumstances like that. But I think that there is a lesson for all of us in terms of the kind of commitment and devotion that he showed to children that were in desperate need. That one never leaves them. And for me, this has always been a very poignant story. I just wanted to share with you. We have now Dr. Chris Locke, who is a friend of mine and also a physician, a pediatrician at Children's Hospital in Developmental Pediatrics. And she is the creator and the developer of the social pediatrics problem that now exists in the Strathcona community that involves a number of people at Children's Hospital as well as many people in the community. She's an associate professor of pediatrics at the Department of Pediatrics. And over the last 10 years or more, she's been engaged in collaborative interdisciplinary research on social pediatrics, has published on this, and has enabled a very diverse, a very disenfranchised community, and particularly their children, to share in vision and address many of the violations of children's rights. I'd just like to welcome Chris, so thank you for coming today.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for coming, and I was quite nervous about tonight, and I see my family here. Often I married into a very large family, and so if you go to a Friesen thing, the audience is always packed with Friesens, but tonight I felt this comfort that I have my family here, so thank you. Oh, you're right. What we see isn't what you get. I asked to go last tonight. I listened last month to Mary Ellen Tripolafond about storytelling. I've heard Ardith before. She's a master storyteller. I've also spoken after Mary Ellen before. It's a hard place to be. But in learning that, I wanted to, I thought long and hard today what story I would tell. Do I tell stories of my patients? I have to be very careful about confidentiality. Do I tell the story of me? This isn't about me. Then I thought I would start with stories from my mentor. I've selected this picture for you to see. This is from one of my patients. This is artwork that is now in our clinic. We now are blessed with having a clinic in the inner city as part of our social pediatrics. And this 10-year-old boy with autism and a genetic disorder who was living functionally homeless with his mother in the inner city in an emergency daycare with the support of my team and the community. After a diagnosis and support for his mother, he gets art classes. He's part of the Canucks for Kids and Autism, and he's in school. And his mother is the school. She's like the PTA champion in an inner city school. So this is success. This eagle for me, it is my power animal. I am a half-breed with my mother from Canada, my father from the States, my father actually from Pennington County. My hope was that I would be a pediatrician in Hill City, South Dakota. I worked on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. I worked at Susan. That was my goal. I met a Canadian, and I'm in my mother's country. But the eagle I carry with me, the eagle, a symbol of power and peace, of freedom, honesty, truth, courage, and wisdom. And I can only hope that as we look where our children are in Canada and recognize that despite Canada's vow that we would eradicate poverty by the year of, in 1991 they said we would eradicate it in 2000, at least 1 in 5 children in our province are living in significant poverty. And this is not just financial poverty, but social poverty. So what can we learn? What are the stories? What can we learn from others? And I wanted to start first with the words that I learned from Dana Brynelson, who was the head of the infant development program. When I started here, I was a young pediatrician, and I did not know what to do when I was asked to speak with a group of birth mothers in the inner city who wanted services for their children. Many of these women had struggled with addiction. We were just learning about the impact of alcohol in pregnancy, and they said, this is our issue. We need to support each other. And I thought, what do I say? And it was Dana. It was respect, understanding, compassion, and hope. And I carry those words in all areas to be respectful, and how we work with compassion, that we recognize that our start in life has a huge influence on our outcome. We are all able to be here tonight for many things that come from our start in life, from our parents, whether it may not have been material wealth, but certainly social wealth to allow us an education and choice, and that we have to recognize that not all kids have the same choice. The other thing that my other mentor, Jeffrey Robinson, said to me, it said, it's not who we're seeing, it's who we're not seeing. And so when Jeff Robinson and Dana Brennelson took me to the steps in the downtown east side of the YWCA at Crabtree Corner in late 1989, my daughter, who was here, she was a baby, I realized that we do have children, and we do have children in the city, but they haven't been recognized. And so when working with Sandy Witherspoon and others, we had some creative partnerships that led to trying to address what we consider the worst pregnancy outcome. It wasn't low birth weight, it was a separation of the mother-baby pair. And we've been successful in improving pregnancy outcome for many, many women, many families who have struggled with addiction and mental health. But where we were failing is that we were not supporting them. We were not going through to the end of the book. We were not supporting them for kindergarten entry. We're not supporting their graduation. So it's here that I need to thank my team. I don't know, and it's late, and I thought I would do things backwards. First, I'm not going to read the lecture that I prepared. I brought copies of the paper that will soon be published in the UBC Students Medical Journal, and I have my speaking slides. So I'm not going to go through the details, but what I want you first to know is to recognize that I'm part of a team, and we need to recognize and thank all the people that allowed this team to come together. I need to pause and thank the organizing group, and Jerry, Sophia, and also Lillian, who have brought so many speakers together, and to also recognize that we've been allowed to enact our model on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, and that we must be respectful, that we've been invited guests, we're welcome guests, but we've been invited guests into a very special community where there's been a great deal of injustice, and Ardith has spoken eloquently about the disproportionate number of Aboriginal children who have been removed. We also have a community of new Canadians and of children who have experienced significant relocation trauma. They have come from war-torn countries. Their families have been torn apart. And we have other families that are living there because of unaddressed addiction and mental health concerns and intergenerational poverty. And they're housed there, they're warehoused there because of the lack of adequate housing and the lack of appropriate environments for children. So that when we look at an approach and a different kind of care, we've looked very closely at what Montreal has done and the way they've mobilized the community. And we've tried to work to mobilize the existing health resources and other resources, intersectoral resources across, so that we are partners in this. And that I see it much like a feast or the time where, I would say, a potlatch where people bring things. Not everyone brings the same thing, but we have something to offer. And so somewhere in my story, I think if I were to say what we came in this is that when we approached this project, we decided that we must do this as an inquiry where we actually evaluated whether it wasn't just by passion, it was also, were we going to make a difference? And so I must thank my colleague, Dr. Judith Lynham, not only for her computer tonight and her skills, but also for her brilliance in pulling together and designing a way that we could actually evaluate an approach to whether we could change the way we practice and enact this practice through the mobilization and developing the structures to make things work. And so it's with that I think somewhere in my slides, this is where we started. This is the wave 3 from the Human Early Learning Partnership. And I needed to bring this this is too hard for me to explain with words alone, but this is a map of Vancouver. This is in the 2007, 2008, when we began to enact our social pediatrics practice. And it's there in the Strathcona area. If you look for dark orange, that's not good. That's on the scale of vulnerability. Approximately 70% of children in this neighborhood were found to be not ready for kindergarten by looking at one or more of the domains on the early developmental instrument. And that instrument addresses 5 domains, which you'll see in these bar graphs. In W3 says wave 3, and this is physical readiness, social, emotional, language, and communication. And you can see that all the bars are high in wave 3. And what's exciting for us is that there's been a change in the number of bars that are elevated by wave 5. Now, we're excited because that change has been shown to have a critical difference in the last wave of study, that there's a critical difference, and that's this green arrow here for the Strathcona area. It's a critical decrease in vulnerability. We remain at over 50%, so 1 in 2 children is not ready for kindergarten entry in the neighborhood where we enact, but the train has stopped, it has turned around, and we're going in the right direction. And so this is one sort of at a macro level look at the evidence of mobilizing and working with community across sectors. And so our logic model captures the term of linking in and linking across. And it's in this way that I have you think of linking in. We've used primary healthcare access, accessing in specialists who can link into specialized services as children need them through Children's Hospital, Child and Youth Mental Health, and we link across sectors. So the sectors are in education and social services. We're working towards legal services, and also in recreation and other services to support children. Again, the beautiful paintings by our young patient that really show I think that the teamwork. And so the 5 key elements, with the 6 being the research, accountability, and evidence, the 5 key elements that have come out of a literature review of over 17,000 publications in the area of social pediatrics in the English language, these elements are key, and these are the things that have been shown in our model and that have been enacted. First, that we have to be working in an environment where you have shared vision and values. The second is that we are willing to share status and power. And for me, that means working in a relationship-centered care approach, which is more horizontal. So there's reciprocity. So we learn from each other. We learn from our patients. We learn from the community. Each voice matters, and each voice is valued. So the voice of the elders, the voice of the community who said, you're the first people from UBC we've let in because you didn't come in and tell us what you were going to do to us. You asked us what we needed and what they wanted, what they needed. They wanted support for early child development. That was when we started. Within a year, they had several issues of self-harm in youth, of suicide attempts, and successful, sadly, youth harming themselves, and they said, we need help with our youth. We were quick and flexible and responsive. So our program, Richer, stands for responsive. We're interdisciplinary. We're intersectoral. Our focus was on child health. It's moved to community health. And the E is for education. We learn from each other, but we have a responsibility to empower the community and also to train the next generation. And we're embedded in research. My passion will not bring dollars, but evidence will. And so we put do-getters together with go-getters, and we have the opportunity to make change. The other key elements that have been in our logic model and have been shown in looking at the realist synthesis of what makes a social pediatrics program work was well articulated by Dr. Julien in his earlier presentation, which is we must have engagement and trust. I know when I see a family that I am there because of trust that's been brokered through someone, their family physician, through a nurse practitioner that's engaged, a key worker in the community, another parent. They do not want to walk through the door to see a developmental pediatrician and address issues of why their child is struggling in school and where they have to explore really sensitive issues that are close to their heart without an understanding that I'm not going to be judgmental and I'm not the end of the road, that there's a relationship and that this will be ongoing and that there's continuities of care. The fourth element that I must stress is the importance of interprofessional practice. There's no one lead. There are different times. We have different skills, and everyone is valued. And we need to do more of that training here at UBC. We have tried in the medical school. I'm not sure that, I feel as if the train is sort of stalled on that. I know there's been a great deal of leadership in nursing. I hear talk of interest in law. We have got to start training together if we're going to work together, because we speak different languages. I heard today, we were talking about the ED, emergency department, but ED in social work means the executive director. So when we call, so we're calling from the ED, they think that they're getting the call from the executive director of, child welfare. They start to listen, and then they stop listening when they realize it's just the docs. But it's very clear that we have different languages, and we have these silos of hiding information, and often it's more like that's not about information sharing. It's more about, and not about privacy. It's about secrecy. And so by working together and training together, I think that we'll actually learn to play together when we get out in the real world. And the fifth and key part is that we empower communities. We empower families, because we go home. We're guests. We're invited guests. But we don't live there. Many, at least in this environment, not many. My goal, longtime supporter, that we change our admission practices and that we admit more people who don't have the same opportunities in education, but certainly have the abilities, so that people from the community can return to their community and be part of the fabric of health, education, and social services. But to recognize that in this current model, we need to be empowering families. We need to give them the tools to navigate, and we need to be there to back them up when they are having difficulties with barriers that we can help dismantle. And so I'd like to close with my version of the medicine wheel. I'm much more visual. And I see this, which was quoted by Sir Michael Marmot, who is now the president of the World Medical Association. And he feels that the estimates from the Canadian Institute of Health Research on the contribution of health care to the health of populations is no more than 1/4. So we need to recognize our place, that the physical dimension, if we think of the medicine wheel, is 1/4, that we have 1/4, healthcare services have 1/4 to contribute. Our genetics and environment, another 1/4, but more than at least half of our population health is dependent on the social determinants of health. And these are things that all of us, you do not need to be from healthcare or law. We're citizens, and we need to be addressing these social determinants. And the key things to a healthy society are, first, 0 to 6. Every child deserves a best start. The second is something my mother would say, which is every kid has to be good at something. And so she would say to me about my own kids, each of your kids needs to be good at something. We need not to be looking at whether it's an evergreen certificate or a dogwood certificate. It's what are we having kids leave school with that they're good at and they're proud of, and that they can do something and be contributing members of society. And so our focus should be on the supporting them being contributing members of society in their community, and not on reaching certain arbitrary graduation requirements. Strengthening healthy public policy in the UK, their focus, and I think in Canada we have to acknowledge, are the same. Obesity, smoking, alcohol are the major preventable causes of morbidity in our population. But we are voting Canadians. Good work for all, a healthy standard of living, and sustainable communities. These are things that are attainable, and we must address these now. So I'd like to tell you about a good story in ending. This is a young man who I had the honor of holding in my arms in the early days of the Sheway program in the inner city. He's gone through the inner city daycares at Raycam and the inner city elementary schools and high schools. He is a graduate of the NASCAR programs, which is Never Again Steal Cars. This is where Vancouver Community College works with Vancouver City cops and the community at Raycam, and kids learn to do things that are important to them. He likes to work on cars. As he said, I really like welding, and he said, I'd like to join the military as an auto mechanic. And his favorite, and his favorite quote is, "Just keep trying until you get it." So I encourage us, we're going to just keep trying until we get it. Youth matter. We need to have graduation strategies, and carry with this, these final words from Dr. Korczak, that children are not people of tomorrow, but people today. They are entitled to be taken seriously. They have the right to be treated by adults with tenderness and respect as equals. They should be allowed to grow into whoever they were meant to be. The unknown person inside of each of them is the hope for the future. Thank you.
So we're going to take some questions. We'll be passing around some cards. Please write them, and then we will accumulate them and try to gather them together just in the interest of fairness. I'm going to ask the speakers to come up and have a seat at the table, and we will have time for some discussion. Just to remind all of us that we have a limited amount of time here, and we have about 20 minutes or so, 15 or so. It's not too long. So Gillis and Chris and Ardith, why don't you come on up here? And we are gathering questions. If somebody has something on your mind you want to ask to get us started, please do so.
Just speak up.
Just speak up. Yeah.
I have a question for Ardith, and it has to do with, I really love to talk about, my question has to do about incorporating traditions into response. And the question is a little bit mean, but it is, are there differences in different Aboriginal peoples about what their traditions have been? And so is there some principle or some way that those can be incorporated into a legal response?
It's just a titch humbling, really, when you can't. There absolutely is differences. And I would say that I think the response indeed, so there's sort of two responses. One is that when we work with kids, if we're from the interior, but we go all over the province. So we'll go to Vancouver Island, we'll come to Vancouver, we'll go to the north. We've quite often gone to Alberta. We have, strangely, a large number of children there. So we take the laws that we have and we follow our children. We're very unique. Not very many Indigenous communities do that. And I think that what you're seeing an increasing drive from different communities is that they want to be able to reach out and work with their children. On this front, I would say that some of the work at least that we've done has involved parents from other nations, parents who are Métis or Cree, Métis Cree. Women had a child, or women had children within our nation, so sisters had children within our nation and worked Klukatma. And what we did is we let the children decide, and the children were, because they had been born and raised within our community, were absolutely livid that anyone wanted to deal with them differently, and they demanded. And our law tells us that we had to respect their mothers. So our process made space for their mums with their own traditions. But I think one of the things that you'll see that needs probably to be done a bit differently is that there's a lot of children, particularly in urban centers. We will follow our children wherever. There's a lot of people in urban centers who may be more disconnected. And I think in working with families who are disconnected from their culture, you need to find a way to recognize that people will form new families, that their allegiance will be, if you've had such our wish would always be And we've never had a case where a child has said to us, they always want us. That's 100%, but we acknowledge that there might be cases where things are so broken that the solution for families in some circumstances will be to reach out to the community that they have, to the traditions that they have, so they're families of choice, I think is the language that some people use.
Many people commented on early childhood education, that this is a very good first step to give every children, despite of their beginning and despite of where they are coming from, a first good step to succeed. In the previous years, there was a huge move towards the implementing early childhood education through the federal government, and lots of pediatricians were really involved in developing this program. Of course, because of the politics, it never happened, but it doesn't mean that will not be revived and we will not think about that again. So I was wondering what we as a pediatrician can do to make the early childhood education important for the average voter.
First, we maybe should again look to Quebec and the differences, because they have made this a priority, and look how they have done this in lessons learned and not make mistakes. But the question of, I think the country spoke, and we have a change in government, and we have a government that I think is very much supportive of moving towards the progress that we had and that we came so close to and then was dismantled. The evidence is overwhelming for 0 to 3, 0 to 6, and continuing. So, Gilles, your comments about how you were successful in Quebec?
Well, we're not that successful. In fact, there was a youth movement a few years ago which was called Quebec Fou de ses enfants, Quebec crazy about their children. And they put a lot of money on developing daycare, accessible daycare. They were supposed to be accessible to the most vulnerable children. They were very popular, but they were invaded by the population who less needed, and the vulnerable children didn't have access to that. Most of my children don't have access to daycare, so it turned very bad, in fact. And now the government is cutting the place in daycare, so we have to develop other programs to support the communities to take over, because the government did not really succeed in this area. So it's not a success story, in fact.
Another lost in translation, all of the things that we are envious for, we realize that we must work together.
Experience what went wrong, but as you just mentioned, there is hundreds of proof that this kind of approach may. Say, okay, it doesn't work in Quebec because this or that. Let's stay put where we are, and we are kind of going around in a circle for years. Knowing what will make a big difference for all children. Doesn't matter if they are First Nation or Syrian or any other children.
Thank you. There is a written question, and it was, how do families access the richer program in Vancouver? It's very low barrier and any door, but recognize the program was developed for children and families that did not have primary health care access. Our open door is through the open door of primary health care. We are supported by nurse practitioners from Children's and Women's Hospital to provide primary care. What we found is that the majority of families living in the inner city did not have primary care. They were using mostly walk-in clinics or our children's emergency department. We have partnered with programs, long trusted partners such as the REACH Clinic, where there are family physicians and more social supports, but we then work in a shared care way where we share the resources. So within the richer fold, we have 5+ nurse practitioners. We have roughly half a dozen pediatricians, a child psychiatrist, a developmental pediatrician, and dermatologist, and we're all bits and pieces of about a half a day a week that are spread. And then, of course, what am I saying? And then we have our adolescent medicine team, and then the partners that we've made with Vancouver Coastal Health, so that we have expanded our reach. And so our referrals may come from our partners, they come from partner schools, they come from agencies, and they come from families themselves. But we are not there to duplicate the services. If there are families, so what Dr. Julien was talking about, families that rush in and see something good, and so they're going to rush in. If you have the ability to navigate and get a family doctor and a pediatrician, you go through the regular door. This is a door for families who have been barred from fair access. Is that all right, team? Did I describe anything else? Yeah, good. There's a hand in the back.
So, question for Dr. Locke and Dr. Julien. Hear me? Okay. Thank you for your talk, and just a question for Dr. Julien and Dr. Locke. Dr. Julien, you talked briefly how you expanded from the first center in east of Montreal to a multicultural center more in Côte-des-Neiges. How do you envision more expansions now that you said you're going to go in many sites across Quebec? How these cultural differences from city to city and community to community, how are you going to export that system? And similar to Dr. Locke, downtown east side is very specific. Let's go in Surrey. Let's go in anywhere else in BC. It's going to be very different challenges. How do you guys see this expansion, and what's the role of the research that you do, Dr. Locke?
That's a very important question. We're fighting now because we had a lot of consultants to how to develop, and most of them wanted us to develop as like McDonald's. Okay, you have a good recipe, you just export it, and we didn't want that, and we had to fight a lot because even people who finance us privately were thinking that way, and we kept saying, no, our development has to be organic, and the word organic, they're scared of that because it seems too, I don't know, communautaire, you see. But we persist. And the way it's developing is when people from a specific community come to us and say, we have a lot of vulnerable children, we want to develop this approach, and they will do it. And the only thing we're very strong about is the approach. The approach is very clear, it's been described, it works. It started with getting close with the child and the family. If they do that, we will certify. But it has to come from the community. We need champions in each community who wants to develop. It's a little bit more, it's a little bit slower than doing McDonald's. A big firm told us that you want 200 centers, we can do that in 6 months. But our way is slower, but since the approach in the province is well known from the population, they ask for it, they press for it. We accompany these people to develop their own center. They're not our centers, and they have to have a board, they have to be linked with the community, they have to be to walking distance from the vulnerable children. Children has to walk to the clinic. No bus, no metro, no car. So it's very organic, but we struggle a lot to keep that the organicity. Even the government with the money, they wanted to speed it up, and we refused. And the first agreement we had, we just rejected and say, "You keep your money. We're not interested." And the next week they came back to with another, respecting the organicity of our development.
Children's Hospital focuses on family-centered care, women's on women-centered care, and I encourage you to look up the literature on relationship-centered care. We started in the downtown east side because we were invited there. We were invited there because the community was concerned, and also people working in the community, public health, and there was evidence that there was a need. What was being done wasn't working, and so, as we speak, there is a richer program that has developed in Prince George. There's interest in the northern part of Vancouver Island, in areas of Victoria where there's similar places. We can look in places around Comox and Courtenay where we've similar alarming data shown on help about lack of kindergarten readiness. And even now, the BC Mental Health Collaborative groups in Surrey, they're looking at what we've learned from the youth model and the youth at risk and youth matter. And so with the help of Child Health BC, all along in this, we've been looking at this, the ability to scalability and not to franchise, as Gilles is saying, we can't franchise this. You have to look at what the community has. It's their kitchen. We often talk about, we have a community meeting or a kitchen table meeting every week. And what you do is you have the community together and you discuss together where priorities are and you move together. It's a form of, it's really a form of getting ethics approval from the community and recruiting and seeing the assets in the community, because each community, as Gilles said, is different. But it is doable, and that is in the plan.
I do have a question here, which is actually for Gilles, which is...
He's American.
I'm American. You know, what can I say? My French is hideous, but or non-existent. But it's concerned the support for the staffing of your program. Is the reimbursement through salary, or is it through episodes or encounters in terms of sustaining the staff over time for your programs?
The staff is paid a little bit less than the institution pays, but we assure the pay of all our interveners. So we raise money. 80% of the money we raise goes to finance the human resources, and we try to get close to what they would earn in institution, but we can't. But it's probably around 15% less. But they have the usual benefit and things like that. They never charge supplement hours. They charge 35 hours a week, but they work more than that. But they're so passionate and involved. We have a superb team. We all work together. We're all at the same level. We can discuss case together. The social worker can say to me in front of the parents, "You're wrong, Dr. Julien, I don't agree with you for this reason." We open the discussion a lot. And they're very pleased with that. So they want to stay, they love their work too. So we pay for these people.
Someone comes in from school or some other place to be part of your conferences, is that just considered part of their job at school?
No, there's a, oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. We invite all the people who deal with the child. The teacher comes, the principal comes, the people from youth protection, they're all invited. We can be at evaluation 10, 15 around the table. But they're paid by their organization, but the benefit, they start to understand the benefit because they come to share a plan. And they benefit from our resources, we benefit from their resources at school, and that becomes very powerful.
I think this is going to be the last question, just in view of the time. But it has to do with, for researchers who are not directly involved in providing services, for researchers who are not directly involved in providing services and support to families, what advice would you have for those doing research in early childhood and development and are hoping to bring change to the current practices?
I might have Judy answer mine, but the first thing I think is to take on a view of allyship and not advocacy. Don't come in with your hypothesis. I think you need to listen to what the issues are before you think that you need to address one area that you think it may. I think that's certainly how this evolved. And Judy, who has been our research lead, and there are other researchers here in the audience, Gilles, they have developed their research. We started with research at the onset. Wherever you do it, you need to have a partnership. And we have different tables to be able to do that, and issues to address around ethics, and the methods that are used, the traditional methods that we learn in our medical training do not work. You have to be able to engage in mixed methods and more qualitative research and more engagement with and participatory research with communities.
Well, we do. We have a special link with the researcher. What we don't want anymore is researchers who comes and play a role different than ours, because they usually would research on small parts of what we're doing, and we don't want that anymore. It's not useful. What we do now, we include researchers around the table, even at the evaluation of the child. So they become part of the team. And it's easier for parents to accept to fill a questionnaire after the clinic, because we're very close with the people. We present them as part of the team. They're researchers, but they will participate as interveners. So it's very rich for them because they get a lot of information. And when comes the question of doing a questionnaire or a blood test or some genetics test, they agree easily because it's part of the whole plan. We have a huge, we participate in a huge research to measure child development every 3 months with biologic studies and genetic studies. And at the beginning, the researchers used to come. They wouldn't participate in the clinic. Most of our parents refused to collaborate. Since we include them around the table, it's easy, it's fun, and when we include people, because the researchers, they want to help the child to get better also, so they become part of the team, and it's a good way to work. We even are developing 2 research chair in community social pediatrics with both university, and the base of the chairs will be around the clinic, not at the university, which is something very unusual, but they all accept it. And the university and the Children's Hospital in Montreal, which always fight each other, are now sitting at the same table to share the research. So it's a big success of the year. Yeah.
I just would add something that we learned from an Aboriginal partner in research many years ago, and came true in this, which was inclusion of the community in any discussion. So we have a rule at our table that it comes to the community table first, and that the community has an opportunity to express concerns before we have any further dialogue with people who might be interested in coming to the table. So whether that's healthy diets and access to fresh fruits and vegetables and fish, or injury prevention, that kind of dialogue happens with the community so that they have a chance to warn us of the potential for misuse of that information and the impact on the community. Ardith, I think you speak of, Aboriginal communities have often felt exploited and mined for information that they didn't consent to sharing, and that they're very careful of being exploited by researchers.
I can't really add. I just say that within one of our projects, we have something called a legal category that we call CROW, which is in our traditions, very sacred, but they're knowledge keepers and knowledge sharers and knowledge gatherers. And so when we were creating our system, we have people that we've identified in this category, both with traditional knowledge, but we are very involved. We reach out a lot to work with pediatricians, psychologists. We work with a lot of people with other expertise because it fits within our tradition, because we have, I don't mean to be, it's for us it sounds funny, but they go, the people who provide, like, doing this, have you thought of this? Scientists will recognize this, like this commentary. Within our legal tradition, that's a very sacred role. And so we've specifically built it in to have that involvement, because we honor that within our tradition. And we had to look around and say, okay, the only crows aren't just within our culture. There's other people squawking. Squawking, when you translate it, it sounds rude. It's not, it's sacred. It really is very highly honored. We find it funny. So in the way that we honor researchers, we've created a special category within our system, because we already had that. And it would be like elders traditionally, or religious people with religious knowledge, and we've just chosen to see doctors or other people who do research in that category. So we have them sit in that group, and it feels natural for us.
So I don't need to be offended to be called an old crow?
Maybe just a comment on the research issues, that I think those who are not in the community, who go into communities to research particularly behavioral issues, you should not think that you are the first person to think of this idea. In fact, there is a long history of researching people in low-income communities, and many of the community leaders view this as somewhat exploitative. The people come in, they get their publications, and they leave, and they pathologize the community and look only at the difficulties, and they characterize the population by the difficulties. So many of the community leaders may resist the entry of researchers into the community because of these past experiences, and if you don't work with integrated groups, you probably will not succeed. So there is a long history of this. So the person who asked this question, I think, really touched on a very sensitive issue, and one needs to approach this with sensitivity and caring and contributing something beyond your own desire to get information. Anyway, I'd just like to thank our speakers. They were really wonderful, and this was exactly what we had wanted. Thank you, Gil, and thank you, Chris, and thank you, Alex.